Welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how to create this procedural car paint material using just a few simple nodes. Now just before we dive into the tutorial, I just want to mention the reason that we're not using the cycles rendering on this is because our viewport display has denoising at the moment. Now with denoising turned off, we do get a lot of noise in our renders and it's a little bit slower. With denoising turned on, we pretty much lose all the detail in our flakes within our car paint material. So instead we're going to be using material preview, which is an Eevee rendering. That will take a little moment to update, but you can see immediately we can see much more of that car paint flake in our material. So that's just something to bear in mind if you're not getting the results you're looking for in cycles. Okay, so here we are in our course materials.blend file where we're saving all our material assets. And I'm going to select my ecosphere and I'm going to add a new material to that. So I'll just click new and we'll call this car paint. Now this is going to be a simple car paint material. So that's what I'll do. I'll call it simple car paint. And we're getting 001 because I actually already have simple car paint in the scene. You saw that at the start of the video. When it comes to a car paint material, the first thing we think of is how reflective and glossy that car paint is. It's actually even almost metallic, especially if you have metallic flakes within the paint, which is something very popular on high-end cars. So we're going to replicate that in the shader. So I'm going to grab our color swatch in base color, and I think let's just go for a deep red color. So I'm just going to take that color and make it a little bit darker, maybe a little bit desaturated. And we want it very reflective, so we're going to take the roughness and we're going to put the roughness all the way down just now. Now the second thing that we have on a car paint is generally we have a layer of paint and then we have a clear coat on top of that, whether that's some kind of car varnish or whether it's wax, anything to make the car super shiny. So we can use this clear coat setting to actually add another layer of reflection onto our object. So you can see there our highlight has got slightly diffused there. In actual fact, we have two highlights. We have the original one for roughness and we have a second one for clear coat roughness. So you can have one of these values slightly higher than the other one. We can tweak both of these settings here. Let's take that one up and take this one down. And you can see that the diffuse reflection will kind of suck up the other reflection, so you don't want to have too much of a difference on these, but you can definitely see with the clear coat turned off we're getting a different result there. So let's turn that clear coat all the way back up. The next thing we want to do is we want to make this more metallic, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to increase this metallic value, because as you can see our reflections start to pick up too much colour from the environment and we get too much of a mirror finish. This is not what we want for even a metallic paint. The way we can fake this is actually by using the specular setting. So with the specular setting turned up all the way to 1, we're starting to get that effect, but ideally we'd like more. So something not a lot of people realise about the specular level is, unlike a lot of these other value sockets, we can actually use a value above 1 within specular. So I'm going to type in 10 here. And immediately we're getting much more of a reflective finish, almost like that metallic, but not as dark. And now our slider goes from 0 to 10 instead of from 0 to 1. We have a little bit more control, so I'm going to increase this until I get something that I'm happy with. So I think about 2.5 is okay. Sorry to interrupt, I'm just taking a little second to explain something about specular value. Now, specular values are based on the index of refraction of your materials. Now, if I go to the Blender manual, and I have that here, we can see that our glass index of refraction is 1.5, which gives us a specular level of 0.5, and water has 1.33, which gives us a specular level of 0.25. Now, diamond, having quite a high index of refraction, actually has that specular value of 2.15. So it is physically possible for a specular level to be above 1. The one thing I want to point out in this scene and this shader in particular, the reason I chose a specular value that was I think about 2.6 was because I think it looked better on the object at the time. if we take this specular value to its default of 0.5 on this Blender demo scene, the BMW scene, you can see the difference in the reflections of this car paint here compared with 2.14, for example, are quite minimal. There's not really much difference. And just as another aside, I did look up to see if it's possible to have a clear coat on car paint made of diamonds. And in actual fact, it is possible. So 2.14 could be a physically accurate value for specular in this case. Next we have this specular tint. So at the moment, all our reflections have been tinted a specific colour. If we increase specular tint, you can see we are getting more of the base colour in our reflections. So specular tint by default gives you a white tint on your reflections, and with specular tint all the way up we get more of the base colour. So this is very similar to the way metallic works. So I think I'll take that tint down to about 0.5. Now what I would like to do now is I would like to add those metal flakes into the paint. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to introduce a new node. This is called the noise texture node. So we're going to use Shift A to add, go to texture, and we're going to grab a noise texture. And since we have node wrangler turned on, we can use Control and Shift and click on that node, and we'll be able to see that update immediately in the viewport. I'm going to increase the scale, and I'm going to increase it till I get to the point where I'm starting to get this fine detail. And if I zoom in a little bit, we can see it's very cloudy. So this is not like little metal flakes just now. What we need to do is we need to separate out either the white or the dark areas into small, discrete little lumps or little flakes. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to introduce another node called the color ramp node. So again, we're going to use Shift A, go to Converter, color ramp. And when we select this, it's going to be attached to our pointer, and we can just move the mouse over on top of this noodle and it will highlight, and we can click and it will drop straight onto there and attach. And now, because we have this attached directly to our surface because of the node wrangler, we can tweak this and see the results. So we can grab one of these flags and move this up. We can grab this one and move it down. But what we want to do is, since we want to have a solid mask, we are going to change the interpolation type from linear to constant. This means that our white flag, as we move it down, will only show us either black or white spots. So depending on how you want to do this, you can either go with a white background with black spots, or you can have a black background with white spots. It's really up to your preference, but it will determine how your additional maps work. And I'll explain that in just a moment. Now at the moment these flakes look fine, they're not too bad. We can change the detail in here to get them more jagged. We can increase the roughness as well once we have the detail turned up. And this breaks them up too much, I would say. So I want to keep a little bit of an edge on these, but not too much. I don't want to make them too out of shape. I think something like that is okay. What I'm looking for here is I'm looking for shapes like this where it starts to break up inside the shape. And that's what I want to avoid. So I want these discrete solid blocks. Now these are all various sizes. Let's look through our camera again. And from a distance we get quite a nice smattering of little spots there. We can increase and decrease the scale, and as we increase the scale up more and more, we're getting a lot more spots, but they get a little bit smaller. We could change our flag here to make those a little bit bigger again. Now again, as I said, when we create these procedural textures, we're looking for something convincing, not necessarily realistic. No one's going to zoom right into your paint material and go, well, those don't look like metal flakes. But in our render, when we see it from this distance, these should look like metal flakes. So we're going to use this color ramp to control a mix of two colors. So our two colors are going to be saved in our color mix color node. So the mix color node is fairly simple. We have a couple of drop down boxes. We have one to choose between float, vector and color. We're going to stick with color. We'll be looking at the other ones later on. We have the blend type. So we have quite a few different blend types. the mix RGB node, or the mix node as it's now called. For the moment, we're going to stick with mix. We have clamp result, which means that we only output a 0 to 1 range. We're going to output color. We're not going to worry about clamp result just now, and we can also clamp the factor. So at the moment, we could type in a factor of 2, but if we clamp the factor, no matter what value that is in the factor, it's only ever going to use 0 to 1. At the moment, we are going to keep the factor at 0.5. So to explain how this mix RGB node works, we're going to grab this base color, click and drag, and we're just going to pop that straight in slot A. And in slot B, I want something that is the opposite color of red, so we can see how different this looks. We're going to click on this little dot. This is the output, and it's yellow, which means it's outputting an RGB value or a color value. So we're going to click and drag that into base color. And let's look through our principled BSDF node again by using Control and Shift. We'll click on that and this should update. And we get a result that you might not be expecting. What we have here is a 50-50 mix between red and this bluish green. If we take our factor all the way to 0, we get 100% of our red color. And if we take our factor all the way up to 1, we get 100% of our green color. So we have this map already that has white and it has black. So if we think about it like this, we are outputting values of 0 for the black and values of 1 for the white. So at the moment, we actually have to switch these colors over. So I'm just going to drag and drop that blue in there, and then I'll just select this red color again. So our white values, or our 1, is going to output our red, and our black values, or our 0 factor, is going to output this green color. Now, it doesn't matter what level this factor is at. If we plug in this node, it's going to overwrite that factor. So let's look at our result. And now we can see that we have our red material with our little blue flecks. Now, looking at this from a distance, I think our flecks are a little bit big. I think I want to increase the scale, so I'm going to increase that to about 800. And let's just move this flag a little bit further down to get less of these. So something like that, I think, is actually going to be okay. Now, we don't actually want this blue color. I think red with gold flake would look much better. So we're going to change this color here to a gold color. I want something quite light. So something like this should be fine. And now we have that gold color. At the moment, our principled BSDF node is shading this gold color with the same characteristics as the red. Now, the red is paint and the gold is a metal. So ideally, what we'd like to do is use this map to change this metallic value. So at the moment, our color ramp is saying everywhere where there is black, we want this gold color. Everywhere where there's white, we want this red color. In our metallic slider, what we actually want is everywhere that we want to be gold, we want to have a value of 1. So this color ramp at the moment is the inverse of what we actually need. So we can actually just create a new node. We can create an invert node and plug this color into the color here. And if we look through the invert node, we get the opposite. So these are basically the exact same result, but inverted, which is exactly what we want to plug into our metallic value. So now if you look through our principled BSDF node, our metal flakes are actually metal. We're actually getting metal style reflections. So we're getting darker reflections here. We're getting those bright, shiny reflections there. And that's more like what we're looking for. Now with the metallic turned on, we can see around about our reflections, we're getting something a little bit nicer. The next thing we want to do is we want to simulate these metal flakes being all at different angles, because they're not always going to be flat to the surface the way they are just now. And because of that, around about our highlights, we don't see them shining the way that we would probably see them shining if they all had a different surface detail. So the way we're going to fake that is we're going to once again use this color ramp node, and we're going to plug it into roughness. So let's see what that result gives us. So at the moment, what we're seeing is everywhere that we have our gold color, we have black, which means no roughness at all. Everywhere where we have white, we're having 100% roughness. So once again, we want to invert this, because what we want is we want our red to be completely glossy and our gold to have a lot of roughness, but not one roughness. So we can't just use this invert node. Instead, we're going to take a color ramp node again, Shift D to duplicate that. We're going to click and drag this noodle and plug it in. And then we're going to plug this into roughness. We are going to adjust our flags. So we're going to take this white one all the way up to the top. And we're going to click on this little arrow. And we're going to choose Flip Color Ramp. So when we flip the color ramp, what we're saying is we want all the values that are currently black to turn white and all the values that are currently white to turn black. We don't want to use this constant interpolation. We want to change this back to linear. And let's just look through this color ramp. So at the moment, what we have is we have completely glossy car paint, zero roughness on our car paint, and we have 100% roughness or one roughness on our little metal flakes. Now, we don't want them to be that rough, so we're going to take this value down, and I think I'll take it to about 0.17. And our black flag, I want to just introduce a bit more roughness back into that. Let's look through our result to see what we actually have. Let's look at it from about here. Now remember that we have our clear coat roughness, giving us this kind of wider diffuse reflection, which is right there. So this one we do want to be quite low, so we still get that sharp highlight. I think around about here is fine, 0.003. And let's check on our gold roughness. So with 100% shininess and zero roughness, as I said, we don't have those flakes being highlighted. Let's increase this roughness a little bit. So this is faking picking up these reflections from different angles. So I want to keep it maybe around about here. And when we look at that further out, it's actually maybe a little bit too low. Let's increase it just a bit more. And there we go. We're starting to pick up those nice shiny little reflections. And that's essentially our car paint material at the moment. Okay, challenge time. So in this video, I want you to create a variation of this car paint material. Now your variation could be to do with the colour of the paint, the size of the noise, the size of the gold flakes, how many gold flakes there are, the roughness settings, the specular settings. There's a whole number of different settings you could tweak, and I just want you to experiment and see what you can come up with. Now remember to make sure that you name your material correctly and mark it as an asset, because you don't want to lose any of these materials. So pause the video and have a go at that. Okay, so I hope you had fun creating some car paint materials. As you can see, I've created a couple of different ones. This is one of the first ones I created, and the idea here was to have white with red flakes. But in actual fact, what this ended up looking more like are these high-end composite worktops you see in really high-end kitchen and architectural visualization. So this just goes to show that sometimes you can go and try and create one specific material and end up creating something that actually suits another purpose better. A better example of one of the car paint variations I found was a blue one with, again, gold flake, and also a yellow one with silver flake. Join me in the next video and we'll look at more procedural textures. See you then.